this is Chris Peters, who's the Head of Sales and Purchasing at Montfort Investments.
Everybody, so if it's okay with you, I'm just going to do a quick 1 hour on decarbonisation and 2050. So I'll just give a quick intro. I think most of you know me from my previous life. I left around this time last year and started with Montfort back in April of this year. So Montfort is actually a commodity trader. Annual turnovers now reached 4 billion in a short space of time. We were only established in 2020, and we're trading everything across the barrel of oil, along with other non-tanker based business in dry bulk metals. At the moment we have 8 MRs chartered in, 1 LR2 and some dry bulk. We're also involved in the pressurised LPG segments. And something that we did earlier this year is we now purchased the refinery in Fujairah, what used to be called the Uniper refinery, that we've renamed Ferme, Full Energy Refining Middle East. So we're now providing 70% of the VLSFO wholesale market in Fujairah of bunkers. Montfort Maritime Capital is something that we'll be launching next year. It's something that I'll talk about more next year, but we're basically looking to establish a fund whereby we can purchase ships and support the in-house cargoes of Montfort along with other trading. This won't be limited to tankers, this will be across all of our commodity-based shipping segments, and I can speak about that more in the future. So, on to today's subject, an operator's perspective of the market and where we are. So Ian's obviously just spoken about regulations. I'm not going to be going through most of them. I just want to come up with one, which is the EUAs. Now it's quite interesting. One of my colleagues, he just spent 2 weeks in Asia, and pretty much apart from one client, no one actually knew what the EUA, the EU allowances are, and they actually come into force on the 1st of January for shipping. So I think most people should know what they are, and they should have things set up for it. But 50% of your fuel from outside of the EU going in, or if you're originating there coming out, is going to have this EU allowance, which is in effect a tax that you will have to buy. The price has been ranging between $70 and $100 per tonne of carbon over the past couple of years. It's been voluntary for shipping, but it's been mandatory for other industries. And with little over 3 tonnes of carbon per tonne of bunker fuel, that's going to add somewhere between $200 and $300 per tonne to your bunker bill. And I don't know how many people are aware of this. Certainly people we've been speaking to east of Suez, they're not aware of it, whereas people in Europe clearly are. If you're not aware of it, it's definitely something that you should be looking into and finding out about. Sanctions. Again, sorry, Ian has spoken about them, so I'm not going to talk about sanctions directly. What I'm going to talk about is people's responses to them. And we're seeing some different attitudes in the market. We have obviously those who are blatantly breaking them, and that's up to them. That's something we certainly don't do, and I assume the majority of the people here. But what's also interesting is how certain companies are responding to sanctions-related issues. Now we have, I'm going to be very careful not to name names, but we have a vessel that had a very similar name, but not the same vessel by all means, to a vessel that got put onto the OFAC list. Now when that ship was due to do a cargo loading for a very large oil major, they just rejected the ship. They couldn't legally do it. And when we went through the process, they actually opted to pay a penalty just in case. So it's quite an interesting concept that there are vessel owners or there are operators out there who are blatantly breaking regulations and doing whatever they want, and then you go up to the top of the chain and people are so cautious that they would rather not do something just in case, even if it's legally viable. So I think now as an operator, when you're looking at the markets and your customers, you need to be careful and make sure that the KYC is fully correct, and also make sure that for those larger clients who are going to be very pedantic, that you make sure that your documentation, your charter party and everything is 100% in order, because they may just cancel you if they can. New buildings. Couldn't find a good cartoon for this one, so I just used a picture. New buildings. It's a difficult market these days. It's not just tankers, it's everything. Now, prices today are somewhere in the range of 50% higher than they were 6-7 years ago. This has had an impact on second-hand market. Ships that were built 6-7 years ago and delivered are now selling for more than they were contracted at, which is astonishing in the market. How much of these new buildings, how much of the new buildings are actually going to coming with dual fuel or conventional fuel? And if it is dual fuel, what fuel are we going to use? I was actually at the Museum of the Future in Sheikh Zayed Road a couple of weeks back. I don't know if any of you have been there, but they've got an interesting concept when you first go in. You're taken in the lift straight up to space, and you're in the 2070s, and the world has put a set of solar panels round the moon. These solar panels are beaming energy enough to supply the entire world back through a system of satellites and lasers back to Earth. And I was sitting there thinking, this sounds great, but how do you get that on a ship? Anyway, if we look at the new building market today, there's a couple of factors that need to be considered. In certain of the nations, you are seeing that the ability to provide refund guarantees is becoming a problem. The number of shipyards has actually shrunk in the last decade by about 50%. You now can't get a new building for more than 3. There are slots earlier, but generally the shipyards are quoting 3 years when it used to be 2 years. And as I mentioned earlier, the price is 50% up. That means that the refund bank capacity requirement by the yards has actually doubled. And this is starting to become a problem because capacity is full. If we talk about tankers specifically, and I'll stay in the medium size range. If we stay in the mid-segment of tankers, this also applies to dry bulk, but we'll stick with tankers, then you're tramping around all over the world. You're not a container line on set routes. So do you go for dual fuel ammonia? My views on that have been public in the past, and it's not available in technology yet. Dual fuel methanol. The container lines have filled up our shipyards and they've got ships coming, and there's still no real supply. These companies have the financial resources that the average tanker owner doesn't have, who's tramping around all over. When that supply becomes available, I'm pretty certain they're going to snap it up. So if you were to spend the average $7 million on an MR/LR size vessel to actually make a dual fuel actual ship today for delivery in 2027, then I don't believe you're going to have the fuel available to you to use it. So my view on this right now is we have to go green, yes, and I promise I won't speak too long on decarbonisation, but I think the only option for the mid-size owner is to make your ships dual fuel ready. They'll be delivered 3 years from now, and then your first dry dock will be 8 years from now. Maybe 8 years from now, you will be able to do a retrofit and then take the benefit of the dual fuel. As of today, we can talk about everything for the medium-sized owner, but the fact of the matter is there is no supply and there's no availability. When that does come on board and it is available, it's going to be snapped up by the much bigger operators. So that leaves those of us in a smaller position in a much more difficult position to actually understand what or what we should not do. Markets, they're quite good fun, aren't they? I think the markets, tankers, we're enjoying a good time, but again, those good times have to stay. As a rough rule of thumb, this doesn't matter what size ship or anything. If you work on an average of $500 per day earnings for 20 years per million, so if you buy a ship for 50 million, you need $25,000 a day for 20 years to basically make that an economic viability. This basically applies to any ship. So in today's market, you can earn above $25,000 a day, but the ships are 50 million. If we're in tankers, which everyone here is, that's great. If you're in dry bulk, the economics are completely disconnected are not viable in the current market. So, do we believe that the market is going to stay where it is? Well, as we said, the new build price has gone up by 50%. Is that permanent? Well, I think that a big portion of it is potentially permanent. There is a current spike with the charter rates, but we don't see that the new build price, with the inflation having been running at 10% in many parts of the world for the past couple of years, then there's been an increase in costs. The labour cost has gone up. I was hearing somebody telling me yesterday that the Koreans are now allowing a higher percentage. It used to be limited to 10% of foreign nationals. They're now increasing the number of foreign nationals because there's a shortage of shipyard workers. I think in Japan the average age of a ship worker is older than me, so that's something. So there's a shortage, which means that they're going to have to pay higher wages. To pay higher wages, the steel price has gone up, the components have gone up, so the new build price of a ship is not going to go down. It may go down 1 or 2 million, but it's certainly not dropping back 50% to where it was 6, 7, 8 years ago. By definition, if the new build price stays high, that's going to keep the second-hand price high as well. Because if you have a vessel that's if you've got a choice of waiting 2-3 years for a new build at a high price, then the second-hand market is going to go high. So what does that say for the day-to-day markets? Well, this is shipping. It doesn't necessarily mean the charter rates will stay high. But on the flip side, most segments in the product ranges of tankers are completely underbuilt. The LR2, the LR1, and even MRs to a certain degree are completely underbuilt compared to what's there. The older tonnage, a lot of it has gone into the grey market. Vessels that have gone into the grey market are never coming back to the clean market. That means that scrapping is going to have to increase, or those vessels will stay outside. And then we have the regulation issue, which I'm not going to talk about, but that also impacts on the availability of vessels in the market. So, in summary, I think that shipping, as we all know, is cyclical. I think in tankers we're currently in a bit of a boom. I don't see the asset prices dropping too much over the next couple of years, and I see that the charter rates are going to remain fairly healthy. I'll leave it there. Thank you.